everyone. Welcome back to Soho Media Club. It has been such a weird and crazy long summer, but we're so happy to be back with you live here on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Soho Media Club, Season 3, Episode 2. Once again, I'm your resident host, Muki Kulhan. I'm an executive XR producer and creative technologist by day and Soho Media Club host every other day of the week. Why not? And like we said, we've had a little short break over the summer, producing a fantastic podcast called Naked Stories. So we do want you to check that out, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But cracking on with today's show, we have an amazing lineup here to be discussing some of the crazy, incredible watershed year that 2020 has been. And we know that it's been challenging, but it's also been so critical in terms of our genuine conversations about privilege and power in front of and behind the camera. So today we're going to have a chat with our guests to show their perspective on things like whether lockdown and George Floyd's tragic death has influenced or accelerated positive action and change. David Olugosa's speech, organizations creating inclusivity and diversity committees and things like that. And even the Oscars adopting BFI's diversity standards to new diverse content on TV, like the Steve McQueen's series, so much more. So let's get on with it and meet our guests for Soho Media Club today, and to discuss what kind of positives have come out of the ashes this year and what work still needs to be done. So let's meet our guests. So let's get on with the show. I want to introduce our first guest, Narinder, who's the co-founder and managing director of Cardiff Productions. Welcome, Narinder. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi. How are you?
Yay, good. We're so excited to have you on the show. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you before I do we have a deep dive conversation.
Yeah, so Pat Young and I, my co-partner in this new business, set it up earlier this year in May. A mad, weird time to obviously be setting up the company. Pat is also co-MD, so we both run the company together, which is really, really exciting. So we've been going for 6 months. I mean, it has been a strange year, and obviously we're going to talk about diversity, but interestingly, there have been a lot of changes outside diversity, which I do think will improve the workplace. And I think that whether it's flexible working, whether it's just actually understanding what we need an office for, why we need it, what we need meetings for, I think all those kind of fundamental questions are being raised. And I think whatever comes out of this spell will actually be quite good for the workplace itself. I'm absolutely certain about that.
And do you think that there's been quite big strides made in 2020, and what is your feeling about the momentum continuing?
I think there have been some strides. I mean, I think there are a lot of enormous number of schemes and lots and lots of things that are happening. I think the broadcasters are shaping up. But just before I talk about that, just to finish off on what's happened this year, I mean, the people that I feel most sorry for are really the freelancers. And I just want to say a word about them, actually, because only this morning, somebody was just sent me an email saying that a very small invoice hadn't been sorted out. And obviously, I was on the case as quickly as I could. It was for a really not a very large amount of money. And it made me think that for people out there, even very, very small amounts of money right now are really, really important. So for those freelancers, total respect. I'm sure it's going to be a lot better in 21, and I look forward to working with people out there. This year, we've just had to ride it out, really. So in terms of diversity, I would say there have been changes. I mean, I think the broadcasters went through, I mean, there was a kind of news story every day practically over the summer in terms of what they were going to do. And and there's some positive things. I mean, I think Channel 4, you've got the accelerator scheme, which is trying to help BME-led companies. Channel 5 have also had an accelerator scheme. There's a small indie fund for the BBC. Screen Skills have been organising all sorts of courses. Channel 4 are taking over a particular day to have black talent, black content. And even the BBC have got like a £2 million fund actually to help out. Now, I think all this is incredible and fantastic, but I think it's a little bit early to see whether actually any of this will make any impact. I think the last, if we take a quick audit of actually what's happened probably over the last, 10 years maybe, it may give you an idea of where we think the real battles are really and where we think the real challenges are. And I think that we have to sort of separate these areas out into three things really. One is what's happening on screen. The other is what's happening behind the camera. And then the third area, which often gets neglected, is actually what appears on the screen in terms of content. Yeah. What is the content really? What are the stories that we're telling, and how are we telling them, etc. And I would say, just to run through those areas, I would say that the low-hanging fruit here is what's on screen and representation. I mean, whether it's families on EastEnders, whether it's children's presenters, or even the newsrooms. I think there has been some improvement. Again, you can't do diversity without inclusion, so we still need to kind of think about what that actually means when people are kind of represented in some form or another. In terms of behind the camera, sorry, I honestly think that I just think there's a long way to go really, and in the sort of higher echelons, massive way. And then you've got content itself, which is how much of the broadcast, how much do the broadcasters devote to content that might appeal to non-white audiences. Again, I think, do you know what? There's been some improvement there, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree. And earlier this week when we were chatting previously, I think you were giving out the notion that content is the most neglected possibly of those three. What can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think it is, because representation alone doesn't change the content. I mean, you can have an Asian family or a black family in a Sainsbury's ad. It doesn't actually move the dial in terms of content. I mean, it's great that they're being represented, and it's great that we're seeing families of that nature. But what I mean by content is, are our stories being told? And if you look at what's happened recently, and that's why I say there has been some improvement and we can see some change. I mean, I think the Steve McQueen thing on small acts was amazing. I think it's extraordinary that BBC should, or particularly BBC One, should schedule it at 9 o'clock on a Sunday. Wow, that would never have happened a while ago. But generally, I think there's a kind of limited space for it. I mean, partly because, we are dealing with very commercial organizations who feel that this stuff won't get a rating. But I think your public service broadcasters probably should ask more questions about how much of this they're having. And in particular, are they just tucking it away sometimes in the corners of the schedule, or are they just wrapping it up in a season when in fact these are our stories? They're all our stories, actually. The Black Presence has been here for 2,000 years. It's not like Windrush was a major point of change. There are stories to be told from a long time ago in history, really, and I think they need to be told.
Exactly, and it's about doing that with integrity and having purpose behind it. You also mentioned previously a little bit about, let's go back behind the camera and that recruitment process. And maybe there's some new protocols in place. We talked about Ealing Council here in London, which is the east part of west part of London. I beg your pardon. No, it's east. Ealing is east, isn't it?
West.
Ealing's west. Sorry, I'm southeast. Whatever. Okay, so having a diverse workforce can only happen with proactive change and recruiting with maybe some new dynamics and some new workflows. What is your kind of quick advice about that for the media industry?
Yeah, just very, very quickly. I mean, I think you can have all the schemes that you want, and you can have all sorts of mentoring. You can have all sorts of stuff going on. In the end, what do we want? We want jobs and we want work.
Yeah.
And actually, that is often about political will. It's about actually saying this is going to happen. My best example of that is a guy called, I think he's called Richard Devereux, who ran children's television at the BBC. He just decided, not because he set up some schemes, not because he was like giving people a particular leg up. He just decided that his department was too white. Children's television went through a massive revolution, and that was just down to his political will. He just decided that actually this has got to change. And you know what? That is the crucial thing. And then I think, secondly, what you need to do is have transparent recruitment, really. I think we've got too many schemes and too many gatekeepers and all that sort of stuff. Just advertise, guys. Just advertise. Please put your ad up. Let people apply for it. Broadcasters, create the space for people to recruit properly for productions. Don't have to have it there and then. Give them 4 months to actually start the thing. Release the money early so that they can actually recruit properly, which will allow real access to the recruitment process. I've only ever been to 2 interviews in my career, and that was the very first job I had, which was at ITV, which was as a researcher, and the second job I had, which was at AP, when I went to the BBC. After that, it's been through word of mouth, and it's been through people calling you up and saying, hey, would you be interested? Now, obviously, I've kind of benefited from that, but thousands of people don't. And I think that I would have much rather have got those jobs through some kind of recruitment, because I would have been clearer in my head about what the job was, what I was going to get paid and all that sort of stuff. There's too much informality when it comes to jobs. And we've got to get rid of it. And the reason why I use the Ealing example is that the local authority here is one of the most multicultural, multiracial authorities. Most of their jobs are actually advertised. And you know what? If you're not happy, you can take them to court. When do we ever hold people to account in this industry? When does Ofcom ever say, do you know what? That place is just not diverse enough. We need to step in. We need to step in. We need to sack a few people. We need to close you down. I mean, do you know, I think we have the machinery already. People think we don't. We do. Right. We do. We don't need thousands of other kind of schemes, really. Just make the ones we currently have work.
Exactly. This is like more examples of actions over words, putting that to application, putting it to use. And this is another great chance to start thinking about, just listening to Narinder, just start to think about, the skill sets and doing mentorships with schools and the groups and the next generation learning media, not just, beyond a YouTube creator, with all due respect. So we're going to loop back around. Okay.
Can I just to make one more point, actually. I mean, sure. I'll be really, really quick. I come from a working class background. I was born in India. I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 7. And it's been a tough old struggle. Yes. I've done okay-ish. But the one thing I really, really think we need to talk about at some point, which actually links everything all up, is class. It's taken me a long time to acquire the skills that you require to go to talk to people, to be able to operate in the industry. I didn't have the accent that I did, that I got now. I had to change all that. And I think mentorship is important. That's quite a cheap thing, actually. It doesn't require tons of money. But to really, really offer proper mentoring to a group of people who really, really do need it, because actually all those soft skills that you acquire in television, to even go into a meeting or pitch an idea, I mean, it's really, really hard if you don't come from the right background.
100%. And we're gonna loop back around to you again, Narinder. Thank you so much. We're gonna get back to that conversation when it comes to our panel discussion, and we're gonna move swiftly on to chat to Anne Morrison, Creative Director of Factual Programming, NeVision, and former chair of BAFTA. Welcome, Anne, and your glamorous hat. Where'd you go? There you are.
Thank you.
Hi, Anne. So happy to have you on board here today. Will you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into our conversation of your time at BAFTA and beyond.
Sure, yeah. So currently I'm building up a factual slate at the London-based indie NeVision. And before that, I mean, most of my career was spent at the BBC, where I spent 33 years as a producer director, and then ending up running documentaries and features and formats and live events, and launching the BBC Academy. So, you know, which is behind so many training schemes that I think was behind this conversation. Mm-hmm. And then I left there and became chair of BAFTA. And since then, I've been on the board of Women in Film and TV. I've been involved with Time's Up. So talk about, you know, diversity, different parts of the world. And that is a big, you know, passion of mine. And I've sort of seen a lot change over the last, various decades of my career, but also very, very conscious there's a long way to go.
And what would you say those key milestones of change? What would you say those key milestones have been?
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to trace across the different years, but I think I've seen, from when I started, which was, in the 80s, mm-hmm. It was a case of, people would tell sexist jokes or racist jokes and expect you to laugh along. And all of that, I think, has changed. People have got savvier. I wouldn't necessarily say that the prejudices that was behind that have gone away, but I think they've gone underground, and that sometimes makes them more difficult to spot, actually. But certainly, there has been a lot of progress. When I started going to big BBC meetings, I was sometimes the only woman in a room of, 30 men, and, you sort of great bass booming voices, and you go, hello, I'd like to make a point. And it was sort of quite intimidating. So, all of this has got a lot better. But I'm very conscious that, we still haven't made as women, as much progress as I would have thought, actually, at this point. When you look at it, only about sort of 10 to 15% of writers and directors, certainly in fiction, are female. And, despite there's a lot of talk around this area, I mean, in diversity in general. And we've had a lot of false dawns when you think, oh, no, this is the moment, everything's going to change. And then somehow it just doesn't. So I think we need to be very conscious that it's not enough just to talk about this stuff. It's actually got to convert into action. And I always think it's like, Elvis Presley, we need a little less conversation, a little more action. It's that sort of thing. It's like, show me the results, because actually don't change that much, even though you feel like we've never talked about diversity as much, surely, as this year.
And action over change is definitely the key theme for this show today. When we caught up, we talked about some of those changes could lie in the hands of the stakeholders. Let's talk about the commissioner, the role of the commissioner, and where this impact could, start or stop the direction in either way.
Well, I think they're really pivotal people, obviously, because in television, we create our programs that we think are going to get sold to the commissioners. And you can have enormous numbers of very diverse companies, but actually, if they don't think they're going to find a very accepting audience, who are going to buy their programs, you don't want to put up those ideas. So I think it's very important that the hinterland of the commissioners, the demographics, the backgrounds, is as diverse as possible. And obviously, where we're coming from is that they have been pretty white. And I think there's been some progress in terms of at least having now some South Asian commissioners and a few Black commissioners, but not nearly enough. And I think that's one of the things that I would say really needs to change, because I think with that relatively small group of people, if we got the demographics of that group right, suddenly you would see, quite a change in terms of the ideas that got pitched to them.
And do you think, as far as in your vast, amazingly successful and positive career, and the initiatives that you've put forward and the changes that you've seen make, and even from the indie sector and BAFTA and at the BBC and the Academy, and from the commissioner angle, do you think that in your view were things like race taken seriously enough, especially when you were chair at BAFTA?
Well, gosh, I don't think it's, ever taken seriously enough. And I think that's one of the things that people are kind of trying to come to terms with this year. Certainly, I think that BAFTA, with the film nominations, which came out earlier this year, which were, particularly in the acting and directing, well, the directing category is very male, in the acting category is very white, and that there was a huge reaction to that, which was really bad for BAFTA as well. So I think, never underestimate the embarrassment factor and the pressure that comes on some of these organizations when that kind of a fuss is made. I mean, to all credit to BAFTA, like they then embarked on the biggest consultation in their history and come up with quite radically different recommendations, which have been adopted on membership, on the voting system, on distribution, and 124 of them. So, let's hope that makes a real difference. I remain optimistic because I think, we've all got enough history to make us cynical and bitter and twisted. We could easily fall into that. But in this area, I think it's important to remain optimistic because that's how you bring about change, by being able to envisage that change and see a way through to how it could happen. So I think with BAFTA particularly, I think, and the Oscars, and actually BAFTA and Oscars talking to each other about how get real change in the industry. Because do you know what? People really want to win awards. I mean, that's what I think is sort of part of the systemic change that needs to happen. Think of the incentives that are going to make people change. And winning awards is one of them. Obviously people want viewing figures. We have to make sure that diversity stays at the top of the commissioner's agenda, because they've got so much to think about, from falling ad revenue, from all sort of budgets being cut, from regional targets and everything else, that actually keeping the pressure on to keep that up there and for them to deliver on their promises, I think, is key.
1,000% agree, and we're going to loop back around to that when we come to the group chat and think about what changes need to happen starting from 2021. So thank you very much, Anne. We did get to say goodbye, but we'll bring you back, don't you worry. And moving over to David Matthews, is a brilliant writer and producer, and we're so excited to have you here. David, please say hello, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Hi, hello there. My name's David Matthews. I'm a writer. I started off as a print journalist about 25 years ago with a now sadly defunct weekly newspaper called Caribbean Times, which, like many other defunct newspapers of what was once called the black press or the ethnic media, was really a recruiting ground and a training ground for a lot of the very well established and kind of like elder statespersons of the black community, kind of like media representation that we see today. So the sort of Trevor Phillipses and Diane Abbott. Obviously she's gone into politics, but people forget that she, her background was in journalism. And I mention that because as I said, I've been in this game now for 25 years. Through a scheme, and I know we're going to get more into this kind of like notion of schemes, probably about, what would I say, maybe 6 or 7 years into my career, I managed to get into a BBC broadcast journalism scheme or initiative, which I thought at the time would be something of an adjunct or something supplementary to my writing career. I've never stopped writing. I'm, now having done the whole weekly newspaper thing, the Fleet Street thing, probably I'm on my 12th book now. A mixture of some are ghosted. Obviously, I can't talk about who I ghost for. That would be hugely embarrassing. We'll get it out of you. Don't you worry. Yeah, but still, right under my own steam, my own name. But I feel that having had all of that, and like I say, sorry, I should just explain, having segued into broadcast journalism and got that under my belt in terms of being able to present. Narinder actually gave me my big break in television back in 2003, 2004. That I, like Narinder, and I guess others who come from a working class and ethnic background, are, you know, we're very, very thin on the ground. And I think that having produced reams of written material, you know, hundreds of hours of broadcast material in one way, shape or form, that, you know, I still feel out on my own in a way, or in a very lonely place in that sense. And you know, I'm talking like 25 years down the line, and at the point when I got into the media in the, you know, in the mid 90s, there was a lot of hustle and bustle and a lot of dynamism, I think, at that point, in terms of trying to shake things up. And I just find that we're having, you know, a quarter of a century down the line, the exact same conversation.
And do you, I know that you know, we know that, you know, it's maybe gone from like a little bit less narrow-minded into some openings up for some potentials and possibilities, and the output, and you know, there's more appetite now for the output and the different types of storytelling, and audiences are still interested. But we know from the concept and idea and the well and good intentions to actually getting published or on air, there's still some problematic stepping stones that need to be smoothed out. What's your best, what's on your wish list for smoothing out those stepping stones?
Well, I think in the absence of repeating what Anne and Narinder have said, all of the above, but I would be more critical in the sense that I think the culture of the media right across the board is very narrow band. And as we well know, people tend to recruit, staff, produce, create in any industry from their own cultural perspective. And the problem that I have with the you know, with the British media, unlike other industries that maybe, you know, whether it's the widget industry or the criminal justice system or whatever, where either the stakes are very high and there's a great deal of scrutiny or accountability, or the stakes are extremely low and hey, it's just widgets. You know, the media, it straddles this kind of cake and eat it position where it's constantly, you know, chucking stones at everybody else and criticizing everybody else for its lack of diversity or perceived sort of structural inequality or institutional racism, and seldom, if ever, ask the question of itself in a big, serious, grown-up way. You know, the amount of times that I've sat in on meetings and in a sort of, you know, slightly provocative way said, hey, you know, like, why don't we make a show about, you know, is the media racist? And it's like,
and then what happened? You got a gold star from the commissioner and it got made?
Yeah. And then I woke up.
Then you woke up. Thank you so much. So we're going to loop back around to you for our group chat. And obviously we have so much more to talk to you about, and the rest of our guests today. So before we get into the group chat, we want to welcome Meera Thavasothy, who is the television director of BBC News and also an award-winning short film producer and scriptwriter. Hello, Meera. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Welcome. And please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, and especially in relative to our topic today.
So I've been at the BBC for, it's 30 years this year, in fact, and I joined through a diversity scheme 30 years ago. And I've sort of left and come back to the BBC and gone off and made films and come back to work my way up to be a director. When I joined, I came in as a floor assistant. So it was right at the very bottom in news, and bit by bit, I worked my way up. And at the time I joined, it was the directors were generally white men, a few white women. There were very, very few people of colour there. But they did recognise 30 years ago that the BBC was quite a white place and they were trying to make it more diverse, but they did that thing of creating entry-level schemes for people to come in and have that opportunity and then work their way up. Now, 30 years on, I would have thought that we wouldn't still have to be in that position. And I think you feel like, I mean, it's definitely way more diverse, especially where I work, than it was when I first started. I mean, incredibly more. And that's great. And I've noticed it. And I know that's not the same in a lot of other areas, but I'm really pleased to say that. However, at the top layers, which should really have moved on significantly, it's really not. And they keep saying the same things about we need to be more diverse. They say, you know, we understand that there's unconscious bias. They keep using the buzzword of BAME, but they don't actually look at themselves and recognise that there's a bit of, you know, there really is an issue there. And it's also partly because they don't necessarily, because people keep coming in at entry-level positions, but then leaving the industry, as David Olusoga said in his speech, McTaggart's speech, that I think something like 75 or 70% of minorities want to leave TV production. So we're not even holding on to the talent and the diversity that we've got there. And there's, you know, what's the reason for that, I'd wonder, and what is the reason for why we don't have the diversity at the top?
Right. So obviously there have been some initiatives made, and we've been using this word scheme quite a lot this afternoon, today, evening, if you're watching on demand, wherever you are in the world. What is your opinion on and your view on diversity schemes present day? And you know, what needs to press forward for them so people don't leave? And there can be somebody starting out today, and 30 years later, they'll actually see, you know, quadruple the growth that you've seen made in the last 30 years.
Well, I think that what we need to do is we need to look at the middle management and higher up, as we talked about commissioners, but it's sort of those people that do the recruitment and make those decisions to higher level. And I think, you know, there are initiatives like, for example, colourblind casting, that kind of thing. You know, you don't know anyone's name, you don't know what they look like, you have a very blind interview, stuff like that, because of, and I'm not saying it's because of bias, I'm saying it's because of unconscious bias. I think that, you know, you may recruit in your own image, or you may recruit people that you feel will be like-minded, and that's because of the, and again, unconscious bias, I hope it doesn't become a buzzword and a kind of sort of global term that's used to blame, you know, to say this is why it's happened. I think people should learn from they should learn what it is and move forward from that and find recruitment. But I really do feel that recruitment in those higher echelons needs to be studied. I've been in the situation a couple of times where people, because I'm a union rep as well, and members in the union have come to me and said, you know, I didn't get this opportunity, and I went for an interview and I did this and I did that. And when I went to get my feedback, they said they went with someone else because they were an ethnic minority. And I don't think any recruiter should be saying that's why they went for someone else. That's just feeding that. They should be saying that that person brings something that the team was lacking. And that's the reason that they brought them in, not because they looked different from you and they've been discriminated against in the past. And I think that kind of attitude as well, that shows that attitude is still there, and that hasn't been dealt with yet. Yes,
I agree. I mean, obviously, I've experienced that firsthand being a female, you know, well, she's a girl, bring her in. Well, you know, no, I'm actually super qualified, and, you know, we can kick everybody's butt here. But it's about, you know, that balance of, you know, organizations attempting they create a quota to set goals for the unknown and for people to start to think differently and change from the more traditional backgrounds into thinking differently. And I should hope that anyone that's recruited on the basis of gender or, you know, preference, or, you know, this BAME word, which we'll loop back around to, has recruited off of merit. And if it's their first time, they have to start somewhere at least. I'm a glass half full kind of girl. So hopefully that can fill the glass up for them to teach their staff, or to always be looking for those opportunities beyond what they might think is a traditional recruit. For example,
yeah, and for example, BAFTA did something really interesting, which was, so for years I had colleagues that were members of BAFTA, and they were always encouraging me to apply because I had such great interest in film and TV. But you always used to have someone who was a member to put you forward. And they changed that and I never got in. And they changed that a couple of years ago. And then I did apply and I did get in. So it wasn't about keeping it within the family. It was opening it up. And I thought that was very astute of them to do that.
I mean, again, you've raised so many important points, but what I've also heard are so many positive points. So although you've referenced 30 years ago, at least you've kind of seen a trajectory that will hopefully go higher. So thank you so much, Meera. We're going to, again, invite you back to the group chat with lots more diverse interaction and conversation that we're about to have. But we'd like to bring on our last but not least guest, Kimberly Spikes, Kim, from the Senior Vice President of Post at SIM in New York City. However, due to the pandemic, currently based in Texas. Hello, Kim. Please introduce yourself and say hello and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to at SIM.
Okay. As you said, SVP of Post at SIM. We offer a little bit of everything. We have stages, camera rental, lighting and grip. We have offline. We have picture and sound finishing. We are in the US and Canada and basically do everything for film and television. What I've been up to is SIM has been traditionally very involved in environmental issues, and this year has spent a lot of time on their purpose and being a purpose-driven company. And I think that's, basically creating a North Star for us. And I think it's really important for conversations like this where people are talking about schemes a lot. I think if your company doesn't have a purpose, if your company doesn't have a North Star, a true north, I think it can be these initiatives can be confusing for people. They're usually inconsistent. They're not from, maybe they're from the top down, but they're not from the bottom up. And so we've spent a lot of time this year kind of creating purpose, and the diversity and inclusion came along right after Floyd. And it has developed mainly in September, and we launch everything officially in January, but we've been doing a lot of work to kind of create a bunch of programs that not only create more diversity within our company, but also I think the really important part for us is inclusion, that people come here and then they want to stay.
And you've referenced George Floyd, again, a major impact this year, across the world. The situation really had major repercussions and had people sit up and take notice. And obviously, we talked about like the Blackout Tuesday and other actions that were being taken. However, while you were still in New York City, the protests were happening right outside your offices. So can you just elaborate a little bit more about what your team, how you responded to what you saw, and how is it making you guys feel seeing all of that right at your doorstep?
I think, as we all know, shootings happen all the time in America, all the time. And I think with Floyd, the difference with that happening with the Trump administration and having such a gridlock in our country, and people are having conversations they typically don't have, on top of COVID, where we're all sitting at home. I think if this event would have happened at any other time, we would have had the conversation at work, and then gone on to our next distraction, which would have been, I'm going to go to dinner, I'm going to go to the bar, I'm going to get up and have brunch, and you just kind of water it down and move on. And I think we had to sit and live in it. We didn't have a distraction, and I think people really thought about what was going on, and people got really angry. I know a lot of employees called me over that weekend, and we're just like, what are we doing as a company? What are, there's this Blackout Tuesday happening, and we did that. But then I realized that morning when I saw every company in America put the exact same post, I mean, you could have just been like ditto. I realized like that's missing the mark in a huge way. So we got together very quickly after that on like, what can we do that's going to be different? But the city, I would sit in the apartment and a protest would go by every hour. And then, everything was boarded up. So you just see this kind of visual death of New York. And I think people at that point demanded change. Employees, like I said, wanted change. It was just different. It just felt different. And everybody was focused on the same thing. And I think because we were at home, you felt like, okay, I'm going to focus my time on figuring this out and what I can do to make this stop.
100%. And when we were catching up earlier this week, we know that, the Blackout Tuesday was an easy, it was a great initiative, and you're able to kind of make your Instagram and a black square or whatever else you were doing on socials or your websites, et cetera, things like that. Which just goes to prove there's a little bit of initiative, and you don't necessarily have to divert to a violent action, and retaliate or try to propose the hate onto somebody else. Protesting could be a scary thing, although, they're mostly peaceful types of protests. What else in your mind are other ways that people can show and make an impact? And, especially with reference to the diversity committees that you've been working on this year about, educating, tackling stigmas and just really championing in the right directions.
Yeah. Well, I think for our organization, we immediately established a team that was, part US, part Canada, because we're pretty divided when it's production and post-production. Our teams don't really work together a lot. We may be on the same projects, but there's a division. And so I thought it was really important to get those two teams together, the US and Canada teams together, include production, post-production, we have HR, finance, engineering teams. It was split between women and men, multiple ethnicities, a real cross-section of our company. And, the first thing we asked ourselves is, what do we want our culture to be? How do we get there? But most importantly, where are we now? Because we haven't really taken stock of that. And what I think we are and what you think we are could be very, very different. And so we realized that we needed to do kind of 4 things up front. First, we need a survey. We need a real census of who works for STEM. And we need to not only understand and get those metrics, we need to publish them, and we need to create accountability around that. We need to, and not only just the diversity part, but the inclusion part. How do people feel at our company? Do they feel wanted? Do they feel like they can go and talk to others? Do they feel like they have value? Or are we going to see something that's we have a whole group of people here who don't feel that way? And so that's really important, is what is it? And then we did a hiring programs, basically training for unconscious bias for our managers who do hire, so they kind of understand this. We greatly expanded where we did our job postings. Before it was just here it's on LinkedIn and then word of mouth. So now it's we have there's a million resources out there to get the word out. We use a lot of government programs in New York. There's Made in New York, which is amazing. They basically train underrepresented groups from the New York area. You have to be born there. And then you basically can go into a production environment, and you do I think it's a 6 weeks training, and then you go into post-production. And so kind of bringing new people into the organization. We've changed our languages in our posts. There's a great software, kind of expensive, called Textio, and it goes through and it's you use this word. Well, people who are 50 to 60 identify with that word, but people who are 20 to 30 think that you're old school and probably don't want to work for your company. Because we realize you're putting out an image and you're attracting people based on that. So if all they see is white men in a company, when they scroll through the bios, they may or may not feel like they identify with that. And language is a big part of that too. So we started doing that. We really wanted to focus on the inclusion part. So retention, looking where we are now, who's left, why did they leave? And I think something that's important for HR teams to do is when someone leaves an organization, you can really ask these questions and you'll probably get a much more honest answers. So when someone's leaving, ask the hard questions and see what they say. Because we've experienced that without asking, where someone later was you have, you don't have a lot of women in your company. And it was I think we do. It seems good. But then you start thinking about it and asking more questions, and that person's pretty forthright from their experience.
I mean, congratulations, first of all. And I know we've only just met, but I'm so proud of you. I think it's so good what you've done. And, whether it just goes to show whether you're a small company or a very large scale blue chip, it's about taking action, and it's about doing something and making a change. And you achieved that in a couple months. Let's think about it. How long have you been thinking about it, but now it's time to do it. And, doesn't take an unfortunate circumstance to perhaps skew people to move in this direction. Unfortunately sometimes, but hopefully going forward, it doesn't. And you're able to, start with those, initial community outreaches, which is always a very, very impactful way to do it, no matter where you live in the world. Thank you so much, Kim. We're going to loop back around to you for the panel discussion as well. I know I've said loop back around about 15 times now, but before we do that, we wanted just to mention to you something very, very important at Soho Media Club, which we're able to kind of produce over the summer. So about the podcast called Naked Stories. So what Soho Media Club did anonymous interviews with people in our industry and openly talked about discrimination that they faced over the years, whether that was about race or gender, equality, across the board. It was hosted by our lovely, lovely colleague, Rosa Quito, and we'd love you to check it out. So if you've not listened to it yet so far, here's a short little clip to give you a taster.
From Soho Media Club, this is Naked Stories, a series taking you into the inner world of the media industry, where prejudice and glass ceilings are laid bare. Stories that are hard to tell out in the open, but have the power to change the future. Produced by PRL Studio, I'm Roses Okipo.
There we are, sohomediaclub.com. So please do check it out and let us know your comments in our YouTube channels and our Twitters and Facebooks and LinkedIns and everywhere else in between. And normally we would love to be sitting with you, having a drink, walking around Soho, stumbling around afterward. But here we are virtually. And just a reminder, I believe there's going to be a Google Hangout, so you come and meet and greet our panelists and a quick hello to me. And hopefully in December or January, we'll be able to kind of hang out a bit longer. So without further ado, we'd like to bring back all our guests from today. So please welcome back one by one in our Brady Bunch square fashion, our short little circle chat. So thank you so much again, everyone. Again, I would love to be chatting to everybody for so much longer, but we want to use these Soho Media Clubs to inspire people to really think about your stories and then going forward and thinking about, the directions that could take. And also just a reminder that, we normally publish a review or a little bit of an update of what happens at each Soho Media Club. So you'll be able to find out about the links that Kim talked about, some of the other initiatives and website links and some stories that are the rest of our guests have been talking about. So you can know that you can come to Soho Media Club as a hub, as a place to get some resources and start and get learning. So let's have a little roundtable group discussion. Remember, I'll try to go to you one by one. Oh, wait. Okay, Narinder had a little code there. Try to give everybody a code to see if they want to be talking or not. But
no, sorry, I was just adjusting my glasses.
It was really good. I like
I need to rehearse that move a bit more.
I think you are secretly drawing attention to that really fantastic award behind you. The bright light award.
I wish I could say it was an award. No.
Oh. So let's just kind of open it up for a little bit of a an open discussion. I know that word BAME came out, but what is the view on this word and what needs to change about this word? David, we're going to go back to you first. We're here to openly, transparently talk about this and how do we make this a positive thing going forward?
I think with BAME, the way that we change it is to just drop it and pretend it never happened. I think, and then swiftly move on to just identifying people and groups as they're commonly identified in the real world, because the problem with BAME is it's sort of passive aggressive and kind of, offensive on a very sort of like low level way, in that it's just crept into the, the lexicon of like the media and whatnot and politics. And it just becomes it's sloppy and it's lazy. Because I just don't understand how you can have black and multi-ethnic. I mean, what is that? So, black and the terms around black people and people of color and, all of this stuff is complicated enough. But then you take that complication and then you add this kind of second course, if you like, of like ethnic complication. There's a black and multi. I mean, like, what's that? That's like half the planet.
Well, exactly. I mean, Narinder, what other?
I know.
That was an actual comment, right? Okay.
No, yeah, absolutely. This time a comment. I think the biggest problem with it is that actually it's not really a very helpful term in terms of the various groups. I mean, the various racial groups are growing at such different rates in so many different ways. I mean, even the term black actually encompasses both Afro-Caribbeans and black Africans. We know that black Africans are in a different place. I mean, I'm talking about on aggregate, on average. We also know that the term Asian is not very helpful either, because actually the Muslim community is in a different place to the Sikhs and the Hindus, and even the Sikhs and Hindus are different. So it's an all-encompassing term which has become meaningless. And what it's done, I think, has actually hidden the black problem, if you like, inverted commas, or the particularly the Afro-Caribbean communities plight, actually. And I think they've really, really suffered as a result, because people go, oh, look, we're really doing well on the BAME front. We've got 5%. Oh, that's amazing. And then actually, if you drill down into those figures more and you scratch the surface, you discover there's not even a single black person in that organization. So I think we need to scrap it, really. And in some ways, I think the George Floyd thing has brought the focus back to the black community. And as an Asian, I think the Asian community is a mixture of different types of communities. There are clearly some communities that need some help. And I think the Muslim community, we have to, maybe for a separate occasion, we need to talk about that separately. But like the Sikhs and Hindus, man, we're okay. Look, we've been here around. We're getting on. And if, like me, you don't get on in an institution, you just jump out and set up a business. I mean, that's kind of what we do. We drive the economy. We get out there. We sell our programs. We duck and dive. That doesn't work for everybody. And I think other groups require different kinds of solutions. And I think we need to kind of separate everybody out and actually get the proper stats on this. And really, at the moment, in the next 5 years, devote some attention to the black community, because I think they've lost out in this process.
Yeah, and it's a mix of empathy and is that policy and standards, or is it something that we incorporate in our productions? Anne, over to you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree about the sort of disaggregation of these kind of composite terms. I think what's ironic is that at the same time, as we're saying, there are all these initiatives and so on, not all of them result in any change. We're also getting a bit of a backlash, which I hear now and again from white men who sometimes kind of go, do you know what, you just can't get hard if you're a white man these days. And it always makes me want to say, well, would you look around? If we're discriminating against you, we're doing a really, really bad job. Because you look at these rap photos, from different productions, and it's really extraordinary. People are putting them up on the internet, and without any consciousness that here are maybe 100, white people, hardly anybody of color. So I think, people need to have their consciousness much more raised about these issues. And I think in the end, it often comes down to a kind of perception of risk. I think when we're outside, our own demographic, there's a perception that it's a riskier decision to hire a female director or, appoint somebody to a senior position who's black, or because we have a sense of more risk, and we've got to make that unconscious bias conscious, so that we actually engage our brains and think, what's going on there for us? Am I being prejudiced about this? Because I don't are.
You know what? Yeah, it's. I think we're at a paradigm shift in our society. To be thinking differently. I mean, Kim, what kind of angle do you think needs to, be pushed forward in order to have that the scope broadened on a general basis?
I think people have to know who works for them. And I think for part of that's like our survey is, I can look at people, but I don't know who they are. And I think that's one thing we've gotten into with other organizations I'm in. They're like, oh, that person's actually from, 3 different groups, or they identify with this one, or, it can be pretty broad. And, and so I think at least for SIM, we really need to figure out who works for us, and then kind of drill down and make sure that groups are represented in a way that they should be. And I think one thing that happened after Harvey Weinstein and the Me Too movement, you just saw women skyrocket up to the top of companies. Like, I've never seen anything like it. You just constantly seeing the faces change on everybody's bios everywhere. And even in our own company, a lot of women moved up. I think people all of a sudden saw a couple of women and were like, oh, I guess they can do more than get the coffee. Who knew? And then all of a sudden you see them, like people who were highly qualified, who had done their jobs for a very long time, get the merit that they deserved. I'm really hoping that we're going to see the same thing kind of happen throughout all the groups that are there. Like it definitely, there needs to be a big change. And I think we've already all discussed this, that change is really at the top of our organizations, I think, more than anything. And I think that's the hard part, is how do you go to people who are like, wait, I earned this. I've been doing this for 4 decades. You're trying to tell me now I don't deserve a seat at the table anymore because it's full of this one group. And that nut, I don't know how to crack. Like, I don't know how you're just constantly bringing people up, and then it just kind of one day it just cycles out, and all of a sudden it's a normal group. That's the tough.
Exactly. And Meera, you touched on that as well when just talking about what happens actually inside an organization. Do you think it's about pushing that forward from a policy and standards and process issue, and putting the fire under those 3 verticals?
Yeah, I do. I think that the problem with using the term BAME is because, however, it definitely wasn't brought about to become what it became, but it became a box ticking exercise, and it made it very easy for companies to just tick that box and say, we've done our bit, but not actually look at the reason why they were doing it and why they wanted diversity across the board, and how the company could gain from that and become a richer place to work, and how they could understand society better and understand the audiences better. And I think that, I think the BFI did I think the BFI were trying to increase inclusion and representation across films. But what they ended up doing was lumping everyone together in the same way Narinder was saying. Everyone got lumped together. So they ticked that box, all those little boxes, but it didn't actually say that they were recognising what they were getting from that diversity. And that's why I keep going back to it having to be at a higher level. It really does. And I think sometimes you may recruit someone who may not have the most experience at that level, but will bring something else in that's so important that no one else can. And recognising that, and then supporting them as well, not bringing them in and allowing them to fail, bringing them in and supporting them because of what they bring.
Exactly, and I think those words ring true, and I think it's very, very important that we thinking about that. So, Narinder, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, can I just say that I think we shouldn't treat race in isolation. I mean, it is tied up to class, and I think it's really, really important to think about class when we're discussing race. I mean, Rishi Sunak and me are both BAME, but we come from such different backgrounds. And my biggest worry about what moving forward is that a lot of these schemes are basically going to probably end up recruiting a few more middle-class blacks or a few middle-class Asians. And I don't think that's really going to solve very much, because those people should be coming through the front door anyway. They don't need help. We need to target the people that actually specifically need the help. Because if you really want to change the industry, you have to have different voices. We can't have the same bunch of people. I mean, Rishi Sunak went to Winchester and Oxbridge. I mean, that's not diversity.
That's correct. That's correct.
He would probably get a job in the media right now.
Exactly. Anne, what's on your mind?
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree with that I think class is a giant issue and doesn't get enough attention, I think, because it's harder to measure, and we haven't absolutely sorted out what our criteria for class are, because it can't be by self-declaration in the way that many other things can be, because some people will say the very fact I'm working for the BBC means I'm now middle class, even if I had working class roots, and other people go, I'm working class all my life, no matter how much money I earn. So, it can be defined in different ways. I've always been quite glad that I had a Belfast accent, because it makes me harder to class in an English sense. So people don't quite know, they can't read my background in quite the same way, which I've always found an advantage. But no, I just wanted to pick up on a very good point that Meera made. just about the training schemes and why they're not quite as effective as we would love them to be. But I think it's very unfair often to ask people to change an organization from the bottom. Very often we're parachuting people who are very different from the groups that they're supposed to join and change. And when we're sort of thinking, oh, well, our organization didn't change. And strangely, they seem to leave shortly afterwards. So I think we do have to focus on, things that train people at different stages of their careers as well, like the Women in Film and TV mentoring scheme, like Screen Skills series producer program, that look at people who are a bit further up and think, well, how can we turbocharge their career, to get further on up?
We actually have a question from our studio audience. Jimmy is a former BBC production apprentice from our working class background who's looking to move into development. What's the key to pitching ideas to commissioners from an Uxbridge background? Who would like to take that first? And if we can make the answer a little bit shorter, and we'll go into quick fire before we get into the home stretch. Well, go ahead. Go for it, team.
I would say, first and foremost, you're going to be pitching to independent production companies rather than straight to broadcasters if you're looking to get into development. So I would isolate the companies that you get a sense of from their staffing, from their recruitment policy, from their output, from their general dynamism, that they're if you like a cultural fit, because in a way you almost have to use a little bit of kind of cultural judo there, assuming that the Oxbridge cats that you might see are in the way of you getting to where you want to get to are using a particular kind of corporate martial art. Adopt the same technique. Just look at those players that have come from where you've come from. They're going to identify with you more readily on a cultural perspective, but critically make sure that when you do pitch to them and you're in that door, have serious material that they're going to say, oh, okay, we need to listen to this guy.
I mean, that is amazing advice, and so true that major broadcasters will commission indies, and a lot of those pitches come first. Keep your eyes peeled for even it's a virtual event like Edinburgh Film the TV festivals and commissioning season, and keep your ear on the ground for those type of coach. If you saw me writing that down, the cultural judo, you caught my ear there, David. My little adding on to that. We are into the home stretch of our show now, so I just want to kind of do a quick fire round to each of you in one sentence each. What is the one change that you would like to see achieved in 2021 if we met a year from now? I'll start with you first, Meera.
Oh, God, that's difficult. But I would actually say something that I found really helped me grow in my role was mentoring. I was mentored by Women in Film and TV in 2017, and it opened up the network to me. And I think that kind of, if that can grow, and I'm mentoring people now, and if that can grow over the year, I think, and it's really, production companies really engage with it in the proper way. I think that could really make a difference. I mean, I found it for me, and I think I would hope it would for others.
100%. And again, Soho Media Club is a great reference and a guide. So we're going to stick some links into some mentoring programs. If you live in the UK, you might be familiar with RISE, which is a women's network program. So the one change that needs to happen in 2021, David, in a sentence, as we wrap things up here, if we met from a year from now, we'll achieve it.
Change the cultural composition of the big independent production companies and the commissioning culture as well within broadcasters.
Good answer. The cultural judo, throwing that back in with a little bit of a, well, no, judo's more kicking, isn't it? Well, or the other way. Well, and what about you, Kim, especially from a North American point of view?
I would hope that more companies will become purpose-driven. I think that's what we need.
That's a good answer and good insisting. What about you, Anne?
So this year we've seen a huge number of the channels in the UK make big commitments to diversity, really bold, ambitious targets. And my wish for next year would be to see those targets met, and for the rest of us to hold them accountable to them.
And last but not least, Narinder, with your shining beacon of light and hope behind you.
Yeah, no, mine's related to what Anne's just said. I think change comes about through a mixture of carrot and stick. And I think the big stick here is Ofcom. And I really want them to come out fighting for diversity. They have the power, they have the influence. They need to really address this industry at that sort of level. I think change will happen from the top and from the regulator.
Fantastic advice, and that's it's the time, all the time that we have for today. So November 25th, 2020. Meet us a year from now. We can address each of these points and see how far we come. A challenge to all of you out there. So thank you so much to everyone on our session today. Kim and Anne and Meera and Narinder and David. Thank you to Tom and Jessica at Soho Media Club and James, everyone behind the scenes. And please remember that you can sign up for free membership, www.sohomediaclub.com. Hit us on the socials and check out the podcast too. So stay safe, everyone. Wear your masks, do something nice for your neighbor, and give yourself a virtual hug. And I believe that there might be, there is actually a Google link that is here within the show. And you can come and say hi to us afterward. Probably only me for like a second, but everybody else might be hanging out for a while. So thank you very much once again, and keep supporting diversity, inclusion, equality, and fairness, and be nice to each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hell yeah!